This time on the Fast Lane with Isaiah, I'm discussing my thoughts on the 2025 NASCAR season so far. The 2024 season was a very great season. We had a lot of passing. We had great finishes at Atlanta and Kansas, and a lot of other things in the 2024 season. One of the best NASCAR seasons, in my opinion, since I started watching in 2017. A very, very good NASCAR season in 2024. The start to 2025 was nothing but lackluster. It was not the greatest. We had a string of short tracks there at Bristol and Martinsville that wasn't the greatest. Darlington wasn't the greatest, and Darlington had been very good with this car. So we started to get even more concerned with this car because of the places it used to be good at, it was no longer good at, including Kansas was not near as good this year. And then the first two races of the year, Daytona and Atlanta, were decent races, but the endings, fans had a little sour taste due to some judgment officiating calls there at the end of those races. And so with that, the 600 comes around, and NASCAR fans, it's a big crown jewel race, a very large race on the schedule. A packed house, a sold-out crowd at the 600, and it delivered. Ross Chastain passed William Byron for the win and smashed the melon. I got to see this in person, and it was a great moment. Ross Chastain smashing that melon. But I will have to say it was a heartbreak for William Byron, and there was plenty of passing throughout the day behind William Byron, who dominated most of the race, so it was a very good race. And then ever since then, we had a good race at Nashville. Great Stage 2, Stage 3 stunk up by Blaney, but Hocevar was closing in, and that was a good battle to keep an eye on. So there was a lot going on at Nashville. And then Michigan, we go there, and we have the fuel between Byron, Hocevar, and Hamlin. And is Hamlin going to be able to run them down in the very fuel-efficient Toyota? And he was able to do so. And then, while in second place, William Byron ran out of fuel. And then we go into Mexico City. Not the greatest race, and Chicago wasn't either. But Chicago yesterday in the last 20 laps was a pretty decent road course race. Shane Van Gisbergen stuck up the show, but, Michael McDowell had a car to compete with him, and he just got taken out. So it would have been very interesting to see those two play a little game of chess if McDowell would not have had his issue. And then Atlanta was a great race. Brad Keselowski, Chase Elliott, Alex Bowman there at the end dueling it out. Tyler Reddick, a couple others there at the end dueling it out. A very good race when Chase Elliott's able to come from 7th to 1st to win the race in 5 laps. I consider that an amazing race when a driver is able to make that many passes in that amount of time. And like I said, since the 600, a lot has changed. Kyle Larson had won 3 races at Miami, Bristol, and then, Kansas earlier in this season. But since Kansas, the last regular season race before the 600 and before his double attempt, Kyle Larson has been on a skid here recently. A very large skid for Kyle Larson's standards. So with that, Kyle Larson has took a step back. And then William Byron the past couple weeks has been bleeding points to Chase Elliott for that regular season title lead, and I believe Chase really needs that. Or he needs to get some stage wins and more race wins in order to build up playoff points. And then, other than that, Christopher Bell's been on a little bit of a skid. So the season has flipped upside down of who our championship contenders have been since the 600. Chase, had a 3rd at Mexico City, a 5th at Pocono, and then a 1st at Atlanta. A very good string of races. This weekend at Chicago wasn't the greatest for Chase, but he got in some damage, wrecked in practice. So it just wasn't the greatest of weekends for Chase this weekend, but considering the previous races up to this weekend, Chase was on a very good streak. So I'm going to give you what I think is going to happen with the playoff bubble. I think the playoff bubble, we're going to get more winners. Hocevar, I think, can get wins. Legacy's had some speed here recently. I think they can sneak up there and get some wins. So I think if you're Bowman, if you're Bubba, if you're anybody near that cut line, you're going to need wins. So I'm not really going to predict who's getting in right there quite yet and write anybody in pen. I'm going to have to write them all in pencil. But for my championship 4, I've got to go with Elliott due to consistency, Byron due to raw speed, and then Hamlin due to wins, speed, and, just very solid runs out of that group and overcoming adversity. And then the last one's going to have to be Ryan Blaney. He's had a lot of speed, and I believe if he makes it to Phoenix, he has a shot to win the title here in 2025.